First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Sometimes it takes a long journey to find the silver lining around a dark cloud in your life. Not that every terrible experience needs to have its gift, right? Sometimes things are just bad. But occasionally there is a pearl of wisdom that offers itself to you only after you've given up fighting your situation. For example, take losing your voice. Can you remember the last time you properly lost your voice? Full-on laryngitis. For a litany of fascinating reasons, that happened to me a lot earlier in my life, and I offer here my experience of how that unfolds that first week. I'm curious if it tracks with your experience. Day one is, something's different about my voice today. It's a little scratchy and hoarse, but I can fix this. I will clear my throat. I will have tea with honey. I will have a cough drop, whatever the thing that you do to fix it. Day two arrives, and now your voice hurts. It's hard for people to understand you when you speak. Your voice cuts out mid-sentence, and your voice gets airier as the day goes on. Which brings us to day three. This is the day that you cannot make any sound. So you try to whisper as loud as you can, which I want to point out is terrible for a swollen vocal folds. Which you realize on day four, because now you can't make any sound and your throat is hurting like crazy. So now you come up with new strategies. You're going to write things on notepads. And this is when you realize that you write much slower than you talk. So as you are writing things, people are trying to get to your point and they are interrupting your thought to say, oh, you're probably asking about the car. And you are, that just slows the whole thing down. You try by the end of the day to write on the notepad, ask me yes, no questions, because you can always do this. Day five, you realize that you went through an entire pad of paper and that doesn't stand with your ecological commitments. So in my case, I happen to have a kid who had a Magnadoodle at home. So you could write your little note, erase it, and then keep going. If you don't have that, you can try typing on your thumbs, but you'll find that they're slower than your hands writing. So this goes on until one day you set all of those tools down and you stop trying to get your thoughts into every conversation. And here is the moment that laryngitis becomes a spiritual journey. What is your life like when you are used to speaking and cannot speak? When you have the same pace and quality of thoughts up in your head, but now you have no other techniques to get them out. They remain unshareable with the world. What does it mean to be fully present to the world but have no voice of your own to share in it? I understood at that moment why monastic communities take vows of silence. Prolonged laryngitis was arguably one of the most spiritually profound experiences I've had in my life. I do not wish it for you, but by the end of week one, I gave up trying to get my 2 cents into every conversation. By week 2 and 3, I interacted with people differently. By weeks 4 and 5, I thought differently with other people. This month, we are exploring the practice of paying attention. On March 1st, we considered the power of attending to a few worthy things well and faithfully, as the Reverend Victoria Safford so eloquently puts it. We thought about the urgent but not important quadrant from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The urgent but not important quadrant being other people's crises that they so desperately need you to solve, even if it doesn't align with your purpose and values. And we compared that with the quadrant of things that are very important to you but not urgent. Living out your values even if it's not on fire. And then last week we explored the challenge of honoring those few faithful things in a world of 24/7 news cycles and phones that beep at us all the time. Did you notice over the week how vocal your phone is? About how important it is to set healthy boundaries around these technologies so that we can use them as tools to support our values, not undermine them. And so today we explore the practice of how paying full attention can strengthen our relationships and capacity to love another person. Which made me think of the pearl of wisdom that is gained from a long, long bout with laryngitis. In a typical conversation, I am paying attention to you, I promise. I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm also running everything you say against the database of my lived experiences. Do I understand your story? Do I have a dog like your dog? Have I also been in an argument with my sibling? And I'll make these connections in my head. Sometimes they find their way out of my mouth. Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I also used to drive stick shift. Oh, it is a lost art. And then I realized that I interrupted whatever it was you were saying about your stick shift car. And so I go back to paying attention to you. But then as I'm attending to your concern about your car, I'll start thinking about what I might say next, what we might call rehearsing a few possible responses. I'll run through my head. How about, gosh, it sounds like your mechanic isn't treating you well. Have you considered finding another? Or, oh, that's so frustrating. Maybe it's time to trade in that car for something newer. That gene is not just in the Ford family. And so this dance goes. I'm listening to you and your experience, but I'm also navigating my experiences, my ideas, my suggestions, my feelings about what it is that you're saying. In a normal conversation, it feels like this. I'm trying to give you the gift of water, but I'm holding it in my hands and it keeps slipping through. It's hard to hold my attention for you in a normal conversation. In comparison, I want to share with you what happens when you've lost your voice for several weeks. You turn off the part of your brain that prepares your end of the conversation. There's no point. It's not going to come out. You are no longer scanning your memories for your related experience to interject. You're not editing the best way to say your thoughts. Your mind quiets, and the other person does the talking for both of you. It's not that you become stupid. It's that you stop trying to sound smart. Think of it this way. A lot of conversations are like tennis. It's your turn to serve, and I will return. And now it's my turn to serve, and you will return, right? But when you're voiceless, it's much more like your friend is practicing basketball, and you're just getting rebounds for them, passing it back to them. And they're practicing their shot, and you're getting their rebounds. Now, when I say this, I want to be clear that laryngitis did not teach me to be servile, to be some sort of an inanimate object receiving everyone's rambling speeches. It's the opposite. I found that when I was forced to turn off my thoughts during the conversation, it's amazing how much more interesting everyone in my life got. It turns out I had never fully appreciated how compelling their stories were, how brilliant their ideas were. Now, part of that is because I never let them finish the dang story. But part of it is I was not fully listening to the words they offered. I was also running my own programs. One could say that being voiceless for a long time forces you to pay attention well and faithfully to this other person in the room. Again, you are not a stuffed animal that someone monologues at, but without a voice, you do have to build a library of ways to communicate that you are present, that you are paying attention, that you are responding and engaged and feeling with this other person. Well, small movements in your eyebrows and head and torso, body positioning, breath and pace. The children were able to immediately identify some of these sort of physical postures of what it means to pay attention. Are you looking at the person? We communicate far more non-verbally than we do verbally. And you would think that someone with a doctorate in conducting would have known that. It is a doctorate in nonverbal communication. You're dancing in front of an ensemble. I was teaching students every day, if you do this with your elbow, if you do this with your wrist, you'll get a different sound. But somehow I had never connected that to the art of being in the conversation with you. So here I got to beef up that skill a little bit, but there was something else. It was a practice in improvisational acting, which is at the heart of a conversation. Isn't that not what it means to fully pay attention to someone in the end, to flow with their new direction in the scene for a little bit, to say yes and to wherever it is they want to start? Dan, you shared such beautiful reflections here about you had been in a role in your family script. No, Dad, you need more help. No, Mom, you're misremembering. But when you have that prescribed role in the script, and these are my lines to deliver at this time, you produce the same play over and over. And it's quite frustrating. It's only, I sense, Diane, when you lost your voice a little bit, when you began to listen to what your parents were communicating, their feelings and hopes and fears, not the details of the words themselves, but the communicating. Only then did those relationships truly flower again into something beautiful and compassionate. Diane gave generously the gift of her attention. Not surprisingly, this practice of listening more than we speak is a spiritual practice across many traditions. The Buddha is purported to have said something like, "We do not need an intelligent mind that speaks, but a patient heart that listens." I'm aware that I just read that at you. I get it. The book of Proverbs in the Hebrew Bible offers a sort of a reverse formation. To answer before listening, that is folly and shame. Jesus was very fond of saying, "He that has ears to hear, let him hear." His brother James offered this wise advice: everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Ah, what a world that would be. Now, maybe you're not as moved by the very old spiritual teachers, so consider Dale Carnegie's savvy business advice. Be a good listener. Encourage other people to talk about themselves. If that feels too crass for you, I offer Maya Angelou's poetic wisdom. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Now, if none of that resonates for you, how about this? Think of the person in your life that you dislike the most. In your life, not just in the international sphere. Yes, not them. Have you noticed how poorly they listen to you? Have you noticed how infuriatingly they interrupt you and offer their advice and corrections or their own story anytime you have the audacity to open your mouth? They refuse to give you the gift of their attention to their thoughts. As the expression goes, don't be that guy. So I come bearing good news and bad news today. The good news is you don't need to get laryngitis in order to practice giving this kind of a gift of attention. You can try it today with a perfectly healthy voice. You can be gracious and an active listener for someone else by quieting the voice inside that says, "Have you tried turmeric, though?" The voice inside that wants to interrupt with their own story. I find little reflective phrases. Diane modeled a beautiful one in her story. "I can hear how excited you are about this," or "It sounds like you're feeling conflicted about this," and then back to listening. We can speak with our eyes far more than our lips. The good news is we can practice this anytime. The bad news is it's not always the right approach. You identified just earlier in this service how you want to be paid attention to. Sometimes people want to play tennis. They want to hear your thoughts on the subject, and offering a listening sort of quiet ear can sometimes be the wrong gift or offered at the wrong time. I want to tell you that in my training for pastoral care and chaplaincy, the professors were very clear. You all should shut up. Say as little as possible. You're not walking into the hospital room to preach, okay? Now, that was all very well and good until you sit down with someone in the hospital or a homeless shelter who wants company, who wants lively conversation. So there I was with my shelter resident, actively sighing and nodding and reflecting, and that sounds really hard. And this guy gets up and says, "Listen, man, if that's all you're going to contribute here, I think we can wrap this up." Truer words. I want to share that I tried this practice with a loved one once. I knew that they were going through a lot, and so as I went to visit them, I made a commitment that I would say as little as possible, because what I really wanted to be was present and loving for this person as they went through something. At the end of that visit, they expressed how deeply hurt they were. They perceived a lack of interest on my part. They wanted their level of emotions and verbal engagement mirrored. So the good news is that we can practice the gift of quiet attention anytime. The bad news is that one size doesn't fit all encounters. In hindsight, of course, that's obvious. No one strategy ever works for everything. But I think for many of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we're very comfortable playing tennis and not used to rebounding. But the more I think about it, I suspect a lot of you are ahead of the curve on this. If you've ever been in a conversation with a spouse or a close friend and you have said something like this, "Hey, do you need a fellow problem solver here, or do you just need some space to process it out loud?" If you've ever said something like that, I feel like you're modeling the highest form of paying attention to this other person. Because what you're really asking is, what does love look like for you in this moment? Are you looking for a hug or some space? Do you want a verbal tennis partner or just a compassionate ear? I cannot tell you how much I did not want to lose my voice as often as I did back then, but I'm grateful that it showed me something. I had, up until then, one mode of being in conversation: tennis. And if we're being honest, it was more like ping pong. The real gift of long-term voice loss was that it connected neurons in my brain that would have never otherwise connected. This capacity to let the other person be the most fascinating thing. And I suspect that you don't need to lose your voice to get there. I think, like any spiritual practice, it's just repetition. So as you journey through this next week, I invite you, when the time is right, to play with a practice of voluntary laryngitis. Don't get involuntary laryngitis. You'll be talking with someone who seems like they have something really heavy on their mind, and just try pivoting with them. In that moment, imagine, how would I stay in this conversation had I lost my voice? What does love call for you to participate in the conversation if you couldn't use words? If we think of attention as a kind of resource, then holding our attention on our own thoughts, all the things that I'm going to say that make me sound smart or engaged, is a kind of greediness. And giving our attention to this other person the way they need it is a kind of generosity. Or as it's so beautifully put in the hymn, love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.